Okay, I think we're live in pre-show. Michael Graves, say hi to the folks in chat. Let's see, we got Kirk and Hassan,
hello everybody in chat.
and Nick and Rudy and MJ Graves, that must be you, and David and Jim and Dave and Tommy and Dave. For some reason, Dave and David is a really popular name for people watching this show. We get a lot of Daves and Davids, and so they have to have modifiers like Dave-O, except for Dave. Dave is just brave because he's just Dave. I get it. Sometimes we'll have Dave E and Dave S. And the weather is a dry fall, warm day for Dave. Dave O says it's 20 degrees in Toronto. Oh, 65.
How's it going, eh?
There we go. I'm not very good on my Celsius conversions. All right. So Michael is here today
20 years.
to talk about PTZ cameras, but not the PTZ cameras that you generally hear me talk about. It's going to be a lot of fun, I think. So if you know somebody that's interested in PTZ cameras, specifically USB PTZ cameras, call them up, send them a text message, tell them to get on here, either live so they can ask questions in chat or after the fact. Now, if you're watching us on Facebook or on YouTube directly, you probably want to come on over to easternshorebroadcasting.com. That's right, just take the name down there and put a .com on the end of it and click the Watch Live tab, and that'll get you in where you can see the chat, because we've got some folks in chat talking about the weather and greeting each other, as it were. So make sure you join us there. And I would love to get some feedback from folks in chat. Is there anything that you can't, you notice we changed the colors a little bit. Is there anything that you can't see? Because I might have put it black on black. So let me know if there's something you can't see, and I'll try to tweak that. But I wanted to, as Michael and I did earlier in the pre-show, is that we got everything in front of us as dark as we could so that it reduced the reflection on our glasses. And didn't make us look like we were some sort of spaced out kids or something. All right. And Michael has already promised to come on another show and talk about WebRTC, which is the backbone under vMix Call, which we're using today. Michael's sending me a 1080p feed at 4 megabits per second, and he looks pretty good. He'd look better if he was coming in on that 4K camera, though. We'll see. Rudy can't see Tommy Willis. Well, Rudy, I don't think we do video in the chat, although that would be kind of interesting, kind of like a miniature what's that thing, a miniature Zoom room where everybody in chat could just have a video of them watching. That would be kind of boring. All right, let's see who else has just joined us. Otis is here. Hello, Otis. Glad to have you. Rudy, of course. John is here. And Rich is here. A rare visit by Rich Ignacio, who is trimmed his portable streaming load down from, what was it, Rich? From 200 pounds to 100 pounds, or from 100 pounds to 50 pounds, something like that. He's just been fine-tuning it because he's in the air practically every week, flying hither and yon to a place where he can do live streaming. All right. Good, good. And a big shout out to, actually to Matt Davis. I don't know if Matt's watching, but Matt is the lead engineer at PTZ Optics, and we're talking about PTZ cameras today, but not his brand. And Matt has completely rewired or reprogrammed, what's the best way to put it? I guess he did something with the firmware on one of their IP controllers. And actually, they remanufactured it, because now the IP controller is power over Ethernet and has much, much, much less reduced latency. So I see Ken's here. Hey, Ken. we'll try to get that upgrade to you because you've got a Gen 2 control surface, and I actually just got the Gen 3 control surface yesterday, so I'm going to set it up tonight or tomorrow as I have time and see, what is that initial latency? That's the key, initial latency. And when vMix Freak has made it, there we go. Glad to have you. Who else has popped in? Rod here. Rod has popped in from the UK. Welcome. Glad to have you. And Michael's tweaking his color. Yeah, we need to do a session on color correction. I'll have to get somebody in to do it because I don't have a clue. Yeah, there you go. There you go. You have been in the sun a little bit out in Houston, Texas. I tried to fly into Houston one time, but they wouldn't let us land because they said the airport was underwater. Holy cow. And I've also flown seaplanes, but I wouldn't want to land one in Houston. I mean, I didn't fly it myself. I just rode on it. All right, so we are down to game time. So, Michael, I'm going to mute you here. And actually, I'm going to mute myself for just a second. And I didn't mute Michael in time, but that's okay. There we go. I got him now. And we'll get started with the show. Hopefully everything's going to work. Let's see. We got audio, we got video, and we're going to hit the go button. So here we go. Well, hello and welcome. I'm Tom Sinclair, and this is Streaming Idiots. There's still time to change the channel to something else, indeed. Welcome. Glad you're here today. I'm really excited about the show we've got in front of us. We're going to be talking about a 4K PTZ cam. So you'll want to stick around for that. But before we do, just had a few reflections that I wanted to share with you. One is, isn't this a great time to be in the live streaming world, where there's just new stuff that seems to be popping out all over the place? I mean, Michael's going to tell us about this new 4K PTZ camera. I've got all sorts of stuff. I'm looking over there at the table, and I wish I could swivel the camera around and show you. But all sorts of stuff sitting there waiting for me to go to. I've got a 4K cam that's about this big that I want to try out. I've got a new PTZ Optics IP controller that's supposed to have super low latency on the joystick. I can't wait to try that. And then I've got one of those Intel Nooks that I've got to put together. I've got to put together and test out. So all sorts of fun stuff, and it's all kind of cutting edge. I mean, it's not cutting edge in a way, but it is cutting edge if it's the first time you've seen it. So it'll be fun to get some of that stuff together. I would remind you that we have if you are new to vMix, or even if you're old to vMix, and you said, I just used these 5 different functions, I'd really like to know about the rest of the stuff. Well, there is a rest to the stuff kind of thing. And my friend Chuck Braverman was kind enough to tell me about his experience the first time we taught this class. So here's Chuck.
Hi there, my name is Chuck Braverman. I'm a longtime documentary filmmaker, and I decided I wanted to do some sort of an online show about documentary filmmakers. And my first concept was doing, something the traditional way. And then I thought, well, gee, that camera's awfully big, and I didn't want to lug it around. And I realized I have a webcam and a computer. And then I discovered that I was a complete idiot. And I found Tom Sinclair. It changed my life. And I took his class, vMix 101 for Dummies, or vMix 101. And I learned I could do things like, I could put my title up. I could cut to 2 people at one time. I could have just myself up. And here comes my title. See, I did learn something. And I learned a lot of things that I didn't even know that I didn't know. So I highly suggest you take Tom Sinclair's vMix 101 class. You'll learn a lot too. Thanks.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Chuck. Wasn't that great? He was a great student. Always asking questions and just, soaking it up. So if you feel like you need to expand your knowledge of vMix, or if you feel like you just don't know that much to begin with, and you just got the software or you just downloaded the trial, come take our class. Go to easternshorebroadcasting.com and scroll down to the bottom of the page, and there's a link there to the class. And if you sign up today, this is live on Wednesday, September 20. What is today? 26th? I think I've been writing the 27th all day. Today, 26th, you get the class for $30 less. So you save $30 if you sign up today. Today is the last day for the early bird registration, and the class starts October 6th. Goes for 6 weeks. It's really good, and you'll have fun with it, and you'll increase your knowledge in vMix. So that's going to be fun. The vMix freak is saying in chat, beware of the Mershal. Tom changed our lives. Well, speaking of the Mershal, do we have the Mershal up? Well, let's do the Mershal. Come on, here's the Mershal. Remember, this whole show is an infomercial for my company, Eastern Shore Broadcasting. And with that introduction, let's go to the Mershal. Ta-da! There's not much more to it. But the idea is that Eastern Shore Broadcasting is the company behind Streaming Idiots. Streaming Idiots is the crazy show where we get to test out and use all this kind of stuff right here. But we build PCs for folks that have special needs for streaming. We sell PTZ optics cameras, Magewell and Yuan capture cards. We just took on the Bird Dog line, so we've got the Bird Dog Studio and the Bird Dog Mini. Of course, we represent X keys. Remember, now everybody else, when they show their X keys, it's all beautiful. But you see, my X keys is just a conglomeration, because that's the real world X keys. That's the way the real world looks. The real world is not all polished. When everybody shows off their studio, it's always perfect. But if you see my studio, there's cables everywhere. There are PCs that are, halfway being upgraded. There are PCs that are under construction. There are testing things that I haven't finished testing yet, or projects that I haven't started with yet. And that's all that goes on with Eastern Shore Broadcasting. So we're hoping that you will join us at easternshorebroadcasting.com sometime and see if we've got some things that you need. So enough of the Mershal part. Let's get back to the info part. One other thing that we want to make sure that you do is you save the date. Don't forget to save the date. The date is April 9th, 2019. That's going to be the Streaming Idiots meetup at NAB. And you're like, Tom, that's like 6 months from now. Yeah, but if you don't get your hotel at Las Vegas and book your flights, you're just going to get stuck with either the bad rooms 20 miles away or paying like $900 a room. And if you have a $900 room, I'd love to come share it with you, because it's probably a nice one. But go ahead and make your reservations. Get on the books, and remember, if you're coming to NAB, you want to stay over for that Tuesday night, April 9th, because that's going to be the Streaming Idiots meetup. And we had about 100 folks there last year. We were expecting, far less than that, and so we'll have to figure out a bigger venue or a pub tent or something like that for this year. Anyway, okay, well, enough of that stuff. So there's this guy that's coming on the show today. His name is Michael Graves, and he just sort of eased into my life as this guy that knew a lot of stuff. And he would write these posts, and he's got a blog. You want to, hopefully he'll give us a link to his blog. And this guy has got some long-term, deep experience with the bits and pieces that make up live streaming. I don't come from a broadcast world. I don't come from a radio world. I don't come from an audio world or a video world. I was just a dad who was shooting pictures and video of his kids playing soccer, and then suddenly got dragged into this thing 10 years ago, and here we are. So with that kind of weird introduction, excuse me, Michael, for not being a little better with that, let's bring in Michael Graves. And welcome to Streaming Idiots, Michael. You have arrived at the pinnacle of your career and your success, because you are now a guest on Streaming Idiots.
I always had this latent desire to be on camera, and here we are. It's only taken me about 30 years.
Only about 30 years. But you've been dealing with video forever. I mean, you were telling me in pre-show that you were
Yes.
editing stuff back in the 80s. Holy cow. And it was much easier to do
Yes,
back
I
then than it
started
is
out-
now.
Yeah, I started out, I spent the late 80s and early 90s as an editor, editing videotape, doing commercials, largely for Canada's largest supermarket chain, as it happens, but also in the various other post houses. And then I went to the dark side, and I was recruited by a reseller, someone very much like yourself, who was selling technology to broadcasters, and spent 20 years there before finally deciding to come home and spend some time with my wife. And so here we are. Now I work from a home office in Houston, and I have a sort of a telephony habit that I turned into a career.
Uh-huh.
But I'm being drawn back into this streaming stuff, drawn back into video by all the streaming stuff that you guys are doing, which just looks like too much fun to ignore.
It is too much fun.
So
It is too much fun.
Here we are.
So when did the streaming part of this kind of get up on your radar?
When Hangouts launched, when Google launched Hangouts, because I'd been co-producing a podcast on telephony topics for about 11 years, and when my partner saw Hangouts, he said, we must do video, even though we're just a bunch of talking heads. And so we've been doing video since that's about eight years, I guess. Except that I always thought if you're going to do video, you should add some production value to it, make it worth people spending the bandwidth, which saw me get into Wirecast, which generated frustration, which saw me move to vMix, and vMix has been a ton of fun. And I had been using webcams since the bad old days of broadcast. In fact, the very first time I used a webcam was because I was working for an English company. I took a tiny little IBM webcam and put it on our booth at NAB so that the support staff and the developers who weren't able to go to NAB could look in on our booth and see what was going on. But back then it was one 640 by 480 pixel frame once a minute to a website, and you would just look at it periodically.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I love it. I love it.
So that's the beginning of webcams.
Yeah, thanks for the plug about Wirecast to vMix. That's always a good story. I won't press you on that one. So tell me what your first webcam was. Was it the Microsoft webcam?
Well, the first webcam I bought was an IBM webcam. It was cheap. It was like $25, and it looked. It was in that beige with blue trim. It looked like an IBM product, and it was pretty much worthless, but it did the job back then. Here's the interesting thing. Back then, webcams had CMOS sensors in them, and somebody told me, an engineer told me, they are basically memory chips that have had the top sawed off them, because it turns out that they're light sensitive if you expose the junctions, and they created, really bad video, but it was revolutionary, right? Flash forward a number of years, we're already doing the podcast thing, and we're starting to do the Hangout thing. And a company called Logitech, who is the leader in webcams, buys a company in Austin called Lifesize, who's an upstart video conferencing company. And the reason they did that is, what's going to drive the adoption of webcams? Video conferencing.
Right.
And so Logitech figured, if we can offer free or cheap software, then people will buy this camera, which is a Logitech 9000 communicator. It was the very first HD webcam. That's about
I used to have
10,
one of
11
those.
years ago.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Over the years, what occurred to me is that webcams were going to fundamentally change the way people communicated. Just the way that, we FaceTime or we Google Chat or do all these other things. But if you're going to be seen, you need something like this, and the one that's built into your laptop is not good. So I forged a relationship with Logitech, and back then we actually got them to send us a dozen of these webcams and a dozen licenses for their life-size software, and we distributed them amongst the community of our podcast users, and we had a test podcast. And we all were dialed in, and it was kind of like World of Live streaming, but this was, 9 years ago. And people got free webcams for their troubles.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's great.
But then webcams keep getting better and better, and Logitech keeps spinning them, and they get complicated as they can do 1080 and higher resolutions. And for the longest time, they stalled. And they stalled, I don't have one to show you, but they stalled with the C920, which pretty much everybody has.
Yes.
That's the Logitech webcam. It's the most successful webcam in the world.
I believe it.
They've sold tens of millions of them, and they're $50 now.
Yeah. That's great. What are you using today?
Oh, it's a good question. This is a Logitech
That's the one.
Brio.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's a Logitech Brio, but I have 4 others connected, and we'll get to them in due course. And just the fact that you connect 4 webcams to a computer is kind of a recent development, because it used to be really difficult to do.
Right.
And was one of the things that motivated me leaving Wirecast, in fact. Won't go too much into that. So here's what we have. If you would put me full screen, I'll show a little bit of different things.
All right.
Okay, thank you. So if you look down in the lower right corner, you'll see a little icon. Because there are several different cameras here, and I don't want to confuse people, I've put a little icon in to indicate what you're seeing at any given moment. This is the Brio. It's a 4K webcam, but we're not doing 4K with it today. But then I've got another one over here. This is a Logitech. They call it a BCC 950. It's not looking at me. It's looking at the back of my office. It was their first PTZ webcam for conferencing. So we have that as a comparator. Then over here, we have the one that came after it, which they call the PTZ Pro. And you can see it indicated down there in the lower right. And then we'll get to the Rally, but right now the Rally is actually sitting on my desk right here. So we might take a look at it when we come to it. By the way, Tom, feel free to interject. I tend to ramble, so I'm happy to follow a line of thought or
You're doing great.
Or
You're
answer
doing great.
questions.
Yep. Just dive in. Take us through the whole thing. This is fascinating.
Okay, so I put the link for my blog into the chat, and about 3 or 4 years ago, I noticed that there were no USB 3 webcams. And I thought, this is peculiar, because USB 3 should be this big enabling mechanism. It should let us do higher resolutions. It should let the applications be a little bit dumber and not need to know so much about video encoding types. Should eliminate a lot of the complexity that we had of trying to do 1080 over USB 2, which was hard. And it stalled there for a while, and I kept surveying this space, and this is when I took notice of a company called Haverford Systems, which is the parent company of a company called Conference Room Systems, which is the sister company of a company called PTZ Optics.
Right.
And so these guys kind of fell under my radar. They were doing some interesting things in reselling some cameras that they were getting from Asia. They weren't called PTZ Optics at first. They were Huddle cams.
Right. They still sell
I'm not sure
the
what the
Huddle
differences
cam.
are. But
Yeah.
are they substantially different? Do you know?
$300 to $400 price point. Not a broadcast quality in terms of the picture. and tend to be a little choppy with the frame rate, is my experience with them. But they're still out there, and they're still selling them. And for folks that need a $300 camera instead of a $1,500 camera, it's a good option.
My experience was that there were three vectors that were sort of coming together, and that was people doing conferencing stuff, video conferencing stuff, certain price point. There were broadcasters in the Panasonics and the Sonys of the world in the 5, 7, 8,000. Now the new tech folks as well. And then there were surveillance companies, security companies who had PTZ cameras that could be pulled into service. And they all were vaguely different, but they were coming together. And this live streaming market, and to a certain degree the video conferencing market, was going to be where they were going to meet. So Logitech took two swings at it with PTZ stuff. And they're a big consumer electronics company. So what they wanted to do was partner with the Googles of the world, which they have done. And if you get into G Suite and you're using their licensed Hangouts, you get a Logitech webcam, and it can be a PTZ camera. And so that, that's a big partnership for them. All of a sudden, they're selling thousands and thousands of cameras, and it defines product development. And lo and behold, those people are going to want to do higher resolution, higher quality, have bigger boardrooms to accommodate, so they need better cameras, and Logitech is following suit. And I think that's where Rally comes from. And Rally, here I'll actually put it center screen, and I will do this, and it will hopefully be in the right place then. There. So Rally is, it's their new high-end, and this gives you some idea of the size of the thing. It's pretty hefty, not as hefty as a PTZ Optics camera, which I have used before. It looks a lot like them. If you flip it upside down, what you'll see is one USB-C connector and then this multi-way. The multi-way is a hint that Rally's part of a larger conference system that includes speakers and microphone array and this sort of thing, but all I have is the camera on its own. And it does have a tripod mount, which is handy. We'll get to that. And then it has this thing, which is a power splitter. It draws enough juice that there might be some USB 3 ports that are not going to be happy with it. So what you end up doing is plugging in its power cord and then having another USB 3 cable that connects to your computer. USB 3 is significant, and the 5 gigabits allows you to do, 5 gigabits allows you to do, uncompressed 1080p 30 handily, or mildly compressed 4K 30. Mildly compressed, it gets a little vague here. If you're familiar with MJPEG compression, you can do that, and it's easy, but you can also do uncompressed using an encoding called NV12. Won't go into the details about that, only to say that it can look pretty good. And the camera does have a proper glass lens with a 15 power zoom on it. So it looks pretty decent, and we'll get to that in a minute. So the other thing that USB 3 does, though, is it constrains you, and that is the maximum cord length you can have is about 8 feet. So that means you're not going to put it halfway across the room and then run a long cable. It won't work very well for you. So that's kind of an interesting circumstance. And I just discovered that because I wanted to put it out on my back deck when I first got it and try and get some 4K video of hummingbirds that were hanging around a feeder. It didn't work. It was sort of I thought the video looked good. The hummingbirds would be pretty, but I couldn't get out there. So,
yeah, I was hoping you would have some video to show us of the hummingbirds. I'm a big Hummer fan.
I do. Only thing is I can't claim that it's from this camera. I shot some with a Canon D70 instead, and that turns out some nice looking video. But curiously enough, that doesn't shoot 4K. So what you going to do? So what I thought would be interesting would be to actually
Michael, one sec. Folks, if you're just joining us, this is Michael Graves, and we're talking about kind of doing some history on webcams, specifically the Logitech line, and we're heading towards the new Logitech Rally, which is a 4K PTZ camera, priced under $1,500, which is pretty significant. So if you're just joining us, that's where we are and what we're doing. And I would invite you to come join us in the chat room, which is at easternshorebroadcasting.com. Just add a .com down there, and click the Watch Live tab, and you can get in on the chat as well as watch the video. So there we go. Just a little kind of midpoint introduction, Michael. There you go. Take it away again. He's putting together something.
Thank you.
Callie,
I am putting it on the mounting plate. Go, get over there. Putting it on the mounting plate on it and connecting it up to its little power brick. And I don't want to do this while I'm holding it because it might not like it. But if I go over here, we'll power it up.
Now, with that attachment, Michael, does that mean that you can get a longer USB 3C cable if you're powering it so close to the camera like that?
This is the problem. Is this little USB 3 has a particular constraint in that you can only have about 8 feet of cable before the data rate falls off. So in the USB 2 world, if you've ever done this, and I have, after about 16 feet, you need an active extension. And I haven't, there are active extensions for USB 3, I just haven't had the opportunity to try them yet. But even so, without an active extender or repeater, about 8 feet is all you can get. So in this particular case, that's fine because it's plugged directly into my vMix system, and they provide a good cable with a USB 3 type C on one end and type A on the other. And let's see, I'm going to add this to our production. Oh, hang on. Well, this is
hanging on.
Pretty much. What I'm trying to understand is here I went to add it to vMix only to find that the little connector had come away. Probably not a good thing. There we go. Okay. There, you see it wake up, it turned its little head. Now we'll add it to vMix as you would add any other camera. It says it's a Logitech Rally cam. And this is not going to look like a whole lot, but there it is. It's working. Now, that's not all that exciting. So I will come back to me, and then we'll put this on a tripod here. Now, I have to send a shout out to my friend Ziva, who works at Logitech. She's kind of one of my contacts there. Very nice lady. Ziva and there's another fellow there named Scott, who's in the video conferencing division. Great people. They've been fun to work with for a number of years. So now we've got Rally looking down the barrel there of my office. And I'm going to turn off the light on the side there just a second. If you're wondering why does he have all these lights on when he's doing this thing, it's because my office is really dark. And what with a thunderstorm coming in, it gets a little bit weird. So now we can go, that's what the camera's doing, and we can look over here just for a minute at the camera's remote. Now the remote is an improvement over their past remotes. It has a home button. Tap that, it goes home. Then it has 2 memory presets, navigation, and zoom controls. But the lovely thing about it is it's not the common IR remote. It's actually a Bluetooth low energy remote, which means you don't have to be in front of the camera and pointing at it in order to do PTZ. So even though I'm sitting here staring at my monitor, if we look at the camera itself, I can start manipulating it. And it's It's a 15 times glass lens. So here's the test, right? It's you zoom on in, and then we wait and see how it focuses. And you see that breathing? I hate to say it, but that's sort of common with video conference cameras. They're not the highest performance autofocus. You can turn the autofocus off, but that's what you get. And it gets a little confused when you have that statuette in front of that piece of art in that row of phones, because what do I focus on, right? And I particularly like that piece of art because it's got a fair amount of detail on it. So that's zoomed in 15 times, which is what the lens does. Then you can continue pushing through, and it does an electronic zoom. And since it's a 4K camera delivering 1080p, it gets about another twofold magnification before you're in all the way. If I hit the home button, it goes back to its home position. And that's about as fast as it moves.
So
have
Michael,
you noticed something, Tom?
the full zoom
Go ahead.
is the equivalent to what? Did you say 15x plus 2x? So 17x is 1080. Is that how it works out?
Yes. It's at 1080. It's 15x plus about 2x. At 720, it would be 15x plus about 4x.
So it can go
multipliers.
It can go all the way up to 7 or all the way down to 720. Okay, is that the maxed out zoom at 720, or will it go even down to 480?
Oh no! Like for example, it'll go down to legacy postage stamp size video. In which case the electronic zoom becomes a greater multiple the lower the resolution that you require from it, because it's the resolution between the relationship between the output resolution you require and the 4K sensor, right? So if you only need it to be a 360p video, then it's gonna reach 64 times. You know, you're gonna get an awful lot of electronic zoom mileage out of it, in addition to the 15 times optical.
Okay, there's probably a use for that. Yeah.
You know, if there is, I have yet to figure it out. But I've seen a lot of people want to take these Brios and use them in a production that's at 720p, but use them with some PTZ. So they want to synthesize the PTZ as opposed to having an optical PTZ. And if you're careful, it's okay, but the movement's never good. So, how about we take a look at this then? This is the, where are we going to find this now? I'm going to make one little adjustment. What I'd like to do is put the Rally camera, but I'd like to add over top of it its controls. So just a second, desktop capture. Those of you who have used Logitech webcams in the past have probably struggled with their driver software and the camera controls that they've given you, because sometimes they're nice and sometimes they're not so nice. So this is the Logitech, what they call camera settings app, and this is new as of a year ago, and this release is actually new as of July. It has sort of two tabs. It will let you see the home or the advanced tab. It's got some settings for each of them. Right now it's controlling Brio, but one of the most wonderful things about this latest version is if you click on that, it will let you control all of the webcams that you might have connected. And in my case right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 webcams connected to this one computer. That's just kind of amazing and wasn't really possible before. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab a hold of this C922. And because I dropped the C922 from my vMix project, that freed up the stream to be
Right.
available for this little driver app.
Right.
If vMix is using the camera, you're not going to see a preview in the app.
Exactly.
Right? So if I go to Rally, then I get the controls for Rally. And what I really wanted to do was tinker around with this PTZ and brightness and all that stuff. And so I wanted to go here. Now, you'll have to fill me in, Tom. Are the controls obvious enough, or do I need to make them bigger?
I think they're good.
Okay. So this is me using the software. That was one click on the zoom. 2 clicks on the zoom. Clearly it's not very refined. It's like, gets you there, but in 3 steps. And the same is true for the left-right control. If I were to, say, like, go here and then, that's not too bad, I guess. But if I use the remote control, it's much more direct, and it's also much more refined. That is, the steps are smaller. That's interesting. And so, if I then say, okay, well, let's do this another way. Let's actually, where are we, Rally? Let's go into the vMix PTZ controls and choose it as a UVC. And vMix controls work about as well as the wireless remote.
Huh. I'm surprised they work at all. That's amazing.
Well, hang on, let me see. I can give you another view on that. We'll try and grab that. Oh, it's not going to let me do that, because it's not going to let me grab vMix itself. There is an awkwardness or a difficulty with vMix PTZ remote, and that is the vMix PTZ remotes for USB cameras don't support zoom at the moment. So you can't, you can make it, no, you can't control zoom. You end up using the camera itself. Take a breath. Looking for questions.
You're doing great.
People have questions. I have answers. We could come back to here, set that back, and now we can play with a couple of other things here. It's not, we can turn off the autofocus. We can rack the focus ourselves. It works fine. The autofocus is not terrible, but you can expect it to hunt. If we zoom in some, let's look all the way in there. By the way, if you didn't recognize that, that little statuette is an Emmy. My wife was an award-winning broadcaster as well. She was a news producer and director.
All right.
So that's kind of cute. In terms of like color and stuff like that, you can set them up automatically, or you can tinker with the controls and turn it up, turn it down. You can control the brightness, what you like, set it to defaults. There is one thing that's worth looking at quite substantially, and that is this thing over here on the Home tab. Oh, there we go. Logitech Rally, Advanced. Oh, it's not showing it to me. I'm confused. Just a second, we're going to grab another camera. See, when I grab the Brio, this little thing called HDR stands for High Dynamic Range. Both Brio and Rally do a much better job at high contrast scenes than past Logitech webcams. Although it's not showing me that control for some reason. Okay, that's interesting. My office is a difficult scene given the light coming in from the windows and also the light from the lamp. And to make that point, we can look at the older webcam, which is this. See, if you look particularly, say, in the credenza there, hang on, we'll zoom in a bit. Oh, too far, too far. I get that a lot. Michael, you go too far. And see how jerky that is? they really have made quite a leap in going from this old PTZ Pro to this one, which is quite smooth in its zoom, not quite so smooth in the PTZ, but it's better. And even if you go to a preset position, it's clearly not something where you would use it to track somebody, but it's adequate for finding your shot before you take it.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So we've got a quick question here, Michael.
It's been seen in public.
Kenny wants to know if you know who makes the optics for the Rally. The glass.
I do not.
Okay.
And well, the glass. That's a good question. The glass. I don't, and they're not going to tell me. But I can say this: they have a long-standing relationship with Carl Zeiss, and the C920 and the C930 lenses were made by Carl Zeiss.
Right.
And that's quite a reputable company. But somewhere along the 8 or 10 year lifespan of the C920, they took that off the camera. And early ones said Carl Zeiss on them, and later ones don't. And so it's entirely possible they've gone to a different vendor of lenses.
Ha, you're right. Huh. I'll be darned.
Yeah, but it is a proper glass lens. And well, even the older one, even the PTZ Pro, was a glass lens, but it wasn't as good. And I think seeing these things in context is important. They are the best webcams in their class. They're the best. They're not going to touch an $8,000 Sony PTZ camera or a Panasonic PTZ camera. But for a USB connected thing for about $1,200, maybe that sits in the balcony of a church and gives you a decent shot that's fixed forever, right?
Right. As long as you're within that far of your PC. That's right. That's the qualifier.
Well, and you mentioned something earlier, though, that I thought might be an enabler, and that is if I really needed this to be, and I'm just not sure, it might be impractical. If I really needed this to be further away, I might put a cheap little NUC right at it and use NDI tools to turn it into an NDI source and link it back to my vMix system.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's worth $350 for the NUC to do that.
Right. Right.
That effectively makes it like a 15 times PTZ Optics camera, except less configurable, I guess, because it doesn't have all the controls that the PTZ Optics camera has.
And it's 4K.
And it's 4K.
That's the big difference right there. Yep. And that's where PTZ Optics, I think, has got to play some catch up. They've done a good job of getting of working with NDI, and now it's time to have a go at the 4K. You better hurry up because the next expectation is going to be 8K. You don't want to miss the 4K bus.
I asked my friends at Polycom about this, going back to the video conferencing game. One of the reasons why Life Size came to be is that people were frustrated that the video conferencing people weren't adopting HD, even 720p, quickly enough for them. So this caused some fragmentation as little teams left and formed their own companies, and that's kind of how we got 720p video conferencing as fast as we did. But there aren't a lot of people doing 4K video conferencing. And since that's a much bigger market than a lot of these other things that we normally play with, it's not clear to me how fast that's going to go. I think we actually should be looking at security and surveillance cameras. 4K surveillance cameras have been around for quite some time now, and the better ones are probably quite useful. But that's why I think things like Rally could be drawn into the service of things that we're doing. They're going to achieve economics of scale a lot faster than Sony is going to come out with a $2,000 PTZ camera.
Oh, yeah. That will be the day. Yeah, I don't see that happening. Don't see that happening.
And if history is any indicator, this thing lists at $11.99, and we'll see it for $8.99 in a year's time.
Wow. That's
and
amazing.
If that comes to pass, then maybe there is some game in it. So what I was looking at was the NDI cameras being announced from BirdDog, thinking, woohoo, maybe that's an end run around all of this. Accepting that that's not a solution for video conferencing applications, even if it is a good solution for live streamers.
Right. Not yet.
Whew.
It's
Catch
the world
now.
is
Open for questions.
Yeah, the world is going to converge, and we'll see how it all happens. Let's see. I don't think you've folks. If you've got some questions, if you've asked them before, and go ahead and post them again, so they pop right here in the chat where we're looking. And if you're wondering what in the world are you talking about, chat, that's because you're probably watching us on Facebook, and we're not monitoring the comments there. Or you may be watching on YouTube directly, but if you'll come to easternshorebroadcasting.com, put a .com on the end there, then you'll be able to see the chat. If you go to the Watch Live page, you can see the chat. This is Michael Graves. He has a long history of working with webcams, specifically with Logitech, and we're talking about the Logitech PTZ Rally, which is a 4K offering for them under $1,200. Well, $1 under $1,200. It's $1,199. But still, that's pretty amazing. It is USB 3C, which has some limitations distance-wise, which makes it a great conferencing camera, which is exactly what it was developed for. And I bet that it would work, Michael, as a studio camera for somebody that wanted a 4K studio camera. And I'll tell you, I'm working with a PTZ Optics 12X Gen 2 camera in front of me right now. And there is nothing, and it's just me. I don't have a staff of minions that are doing all these things for me. And there's nothing like being able to grab my remote control and make all the fine-tune adjustments I need to on this camera without having to get up, walk over there, try to estimate where I might have been sitting, and then come back down and sit down and say, oh, no, I missed it by an inch, and go back up. And then, if I hit the tripod or turn the camera off or do something and things get shifted, I have to go through that process again. But with this camera, it's painfully easy, and I could see those same exact benefits transferring over to the Logitech PTZ Rally with 4K as an addition and 15X, and being, let's see, $1,200 from this camera right here is $1,600, so it's $400 difference. For $400 less, I get 4K, but I have the distance thing that I have to work with. But here in a studio, distance is not as much of an issue as it would be in a church environment or a sporting environment or an event environment, something like that, where you want to put your cameras a little closer or in different places in order to get different angles. Michael, this has been just really, really great and helpful. Did you get some questions here?
Danny is saying that it just says a Logitech engineered glass lens, but it would be nice to know who made it. Yeah, I somewhat agree, excepting that I will give you to my my general principle on these things. $1,200 is a little beyond that's beyond my mad money class. I don't just buy that. But like I ended up buying almost every webcam made by a major manufacturer at one point or another, because I would spend $100, I would tinker with it, learn something about it, I would throw it in a box if I wanted to keep it, or I would release it to the wilds of eBay and get half or more of my money back.
Right.
And I take this as a great way to learn about things. And so in this case, I just contacted my Logitech friends and said, could you send me one? And they were like, okay, because it turns out that very few people in the world are sufficiently interested in webcams to be able to spend time evaluating them. So,
good for you.
On the other hand, the gig that I did with your PTZ Optics cameras,
yeah,
I could do it with this, but it wouldn't be as easy.
Right.
Because the PTZ remote control over the network is a really nice thing to have.
Right.
And the PTZ Optics software for controlling that was very handy. So I still think you get what you pay for, but...
Right. What Michael's talking about is he rented a couple of PTZ Optics cameras for a gig he had in Chicago. And Yeah, and that's an interesting comparison. Interesting comparison. Looks like you've got a question here from Kenny that okay, you got it. The USB-C is the only way to get video out of that camera. That's right. That's right.
Now it's USB-C on the camera, but it's a USB type, USB 3A type on the far end, so it connects to a regular USB 3 connector on your computer. It doesn't require USB-C on your computer.
Okay. All right. That's good. So that makes it a little able to go back in time and hook up to everything I have in my studio. Yeah. I don't think I have a USB 3C device here in the studio. I could.
And it's difficult to add USB 3C interfaces because they require a lot of power.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Well, Michael, you have been a champ to come on and share all this stuff with us. And one little tidbit, if you're watching and you're thinking about, okay, future shows, Michael also has a deep interest in WebRTC, which, as you know, is the foundation for vMix Call, the video calling feature in vMix. So he's going to come back on the show in the future and kind of give us some of the backstory on WebRTC and basically explain some of the quirks maybe of vMix Call and how to optimize that and make it work as its best. So Michael, we'll have to get you on the calendar for that on a sunny day in Houston, Texas, not a cloudy, overcast day where there are thunderstorms in the neighborhood. And Michael has put his podcast address in chat, which turned out to be really, really small. I'm sorry about that. And that is vuc.me, vuc.me. Is that it, Michael? Okay, good deal.
VUC, yeah.
vuc.me. There you go. All right.
And just in case my co-producer listens, Randy, thank you. It's actually his podcast. I just co-produced with him.
Okay, we're going to move into the post-show. If you've got some questions for Michael, we'll have him there in the post-show. But it was a treat to have him on the show with us today and to know that he's coming back and talk to us about WebRTC. If you haven't already, we invite you to subscribe on YouTube. If you like streaming stuff and you're saying, okay, I need more, I want to talk to people all the time about streaming stuff, then you need to join our Facebook group, which is the Streaming Idiots on Facebook. So just go to Facebook and type in Streaming Idiots and you'll find us. You do have to answer some questions, and you have to answer the questions right or you don't get in. If you don't give us an email address, i.e. if you're not accountable, you don't get in. But nevertheless, we'd be delighted to have you. Streaming Idiots on Facebook. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Don't forget, coming up, actually today is the last day to sign up for the vMix 101 class and get the discount. You can sign up tomorrow, but you'll pay $30 more. The vMix 101, everything you wanted to know about vMix getting started. And then don't forget to save the date, April 9th, 2019, NAB Las Vegas, the Streaming Idiots meet up there. I am Tom Sinclair. I am still Tom Sinclair. It has been my pleasure to bring Streaming Idiots to you. We'll see you next Wednesday at 3 o'clock Eastern with another exciting subject. Not sure what it's going to be yet, but I know it will be exciting, so you won't want to miss it. We'll see you then. Oh, and stick around for a second for the post show. Yes, you do. Stick around for the post show. We are done. We are done. Thank you, Michael Graves. This has been a blast. It's so cool of you to take time out to come on the show like this. Let's see who else showed up in chat since the last time we checked. Jeru is here. Kenny is here, but we knew about Kenny because he's been asking questions. Guido is here. Welcome, sir. Martin Stuckey is here. Welcome, sir. Martin K is another popular name. Martin K, Martin Stuckey, Martin Sinclair, Martin Steed. There are lots of Martins. Glenn is here. Hey, Glenn, glad to have you. And, of course, Ken we had welcomed earlier All right. So, Michael, what is the greatest number of webcams you've had connected? Connected and running on one PC at one time, or is today that day?
Today is that day. Yeah, 4 was my limit before. Today we've got 5. It used to be so difficult to do this, and the reason was Wirecast did not allow Windows users to specify the encoding type of a webcam. So you would just pick on Windows. Don't get me started about Wirecast. It's not pretty. On Windows, you could pick the resolution, but you couldn't pick the encoding type. And if you just didn't know what they were doing. Whereas on the Mac version, you could pick both the resolution and the encoding type. Because if you want to do 1080 with a USB 2 camera, you must be using MJPEG, or you're going to get 10 frames a second.
Right.
And then for the longest time, I actually did a video a couple of years ago where I took 3 Logitech webcams and set them up at 1080 and made like a quad split just to prove that it could be done, because people were saying, oh, you can't do it. Well, you can't do it in Wirecast. You can do it in vMix. So
that is too funny.
Yeah.
So Otis says that he's in Houston too. So it might be interesting.
Well, hey, Otis. I am inside the loop, if that helps or matters.
All right, and you said MJPEG. All right, so I'm redefining one of my webcams here as MJPEG. I wanted to see if
there
it
are
affects anything.
4 encodings, 4 major encodings with webcams. There's basically uncompressed, although there's a handful of them. Then there's MJPEG and H.264, and there are 2 kinds of H.264. That's when you're connected by a USB 2, the compressed modes let you have higher resolution and higher frame rates over a link that's constrained to 480 megabits. And in point of fact, if you're on a USB 3 hub, I've had 4 USB 2 webcams connected to a USB 3 hub, and they all work fine. But you do get to a point where you're not using more bandwidth than the hub has, but you're using more interrupts than the USB controller can handle.
Huh.
So there's more than one way to overrun it, basically.
Uh-huh. And what does it look
these
like
are your
when
headaches,
you
though.
overrun
You
it
need
like
to be
that?
buying PTZ optics cameras. You start to get stuttery video from the last camera added.
Okay. And that tells you that's an interrupt problem and not a bandwidth problem. Interesting.
Yes, because you're overrunning the ability of the controller to maintain the streams.
Got it.
You know what they say, don't cross the streams.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Funny how that jumps into our vocabulary. Yes, I got it. So, yeah, I'm hoping that something like this Logitech camera will encourage our guys in Pennsylvania at PTZ Optics, the subsidiary of Haverford Systems, also makers of the Huddle Cam. We'll get them going on a 4K offering. The question seems to be, and I don't have any any special knowledge on this, but the question in my mind is, are they going to try to do a 4K camera next, or are they going to try to do what Bird Dog did and do a full NDI camera next? And so it'll be interesting to see which direction they head, whether they head towards 4K, or maybe they bite the bullet and they do both of them at once. That would be interesting.
I don't know that 4K is going to have any real impact in the live streaming world for a while yet. So given the life cycle of their products is not that long, it's like a year or 2, maybe, between the generations, it seems like they could probably do a full NDI one at 1080 and still keep a lot of people happy. Because I think anybody who's concerned about 4K is probably going to be spending more money anyway. That would be my guess.
Interesting. The thing I like
Kenny
about
has a question. He
4K,
says,
at least, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry about that. Go right ahead.
Sorry. Kenny is asking about high quality voice. Yeah, that's kind of the company I work for. We do what's called HD voice conferencing, which means sending production quality audio. Kind of, we do it over IP, but you can interface with regular telephones too.
All right. Joni is back. He made it back after a month. Glad to have you back. No, what I was wondering, Michael, what I'm thinking is here's the distinct advantage in 4K, which I haven't seen many people pick up on yet, although you alluded to it briefly, which is the ability to take a 4K shot and slice it and dice it into as many different 1080p shots as you want. So, for example, on a show like this, if I were in a real studio and I had real guests, I can take one 4K image and I can slice it and dice it in vMix and come up with 3 images if I've got 3 guests. Each one of the images is 1080p because it only takes a slice. I don't have to have the full width. And I've accomplished all of that with one camera. And I think
you want to do it now?
Sure. I want you to do it because you're not sending me 4K. vMix call won't transport 4K yet.
No, but I'm sending you 1080p, but I'm going to set the camera up for 4K, and we'll set up 2 different shots, synthesize 2 different shots out of it.
Okay.
So, oh yeah, I know. Well, what's that? 31. You got to pick the right resolution or it gets unhappy. Okay, now just for fun, that is the 4K image being sent to you, but of course vMix is sending it down to what have you, right? It's down-resing it for you.
Right.
So that's the full image. So I ought now to be able to create a virtual input based on that. Hang on, I'll come back to here. Come back to me. I ought to be able to reposition that by a factor of, I can probably zoom in at least to 25% of it. Oops. That would be a factor of 4, let's say. No, I'll call it 3. 43. 3. Okay, and now let's... The problem with this is not such a great scene with which to know what's going on, but...
Right.
Here we go. So that's 1. And we'll duplicate that, create another virtual input, and we will just slide that one across.
Right. If you look closely, folks, you can watch the reflection in his glasses and see what he's doing.
Here's the full shot. Here is zoomed in by a factor of 3 on the left side of the shot, and here's zoomed in by a factor of 3 on the right side of the shot, and then come back to here. The thunderstorm is cleared, so it's getting a little bit brighter. It's easier on the camera, maybe. Boy, I wish I had... What I do notice when I do this, when I zoom in, is all of these low-end cameras, I've seen this with other models as well, they're all noisy. You see in blacks, you see a fair bit of activity.
Right, right. I was noticing that on the wall. The green wall has a lot of movement in it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's because the scene is not appropriately lit. If we were in a proper studio, maybe lit more like yours, it would be better.
That would help. Yeah.
Joni is saying 4K would also use more CPU even to slice it and dice it. Yes, that's true. It's running about, bringing in just the 4K source is using about 10% more CPU.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. But you compare that and say, okay, one 4K camera versus three 1080p cameras. You know, where is the balance there? CPU, it probably is a wash. Plus, when you consider the cost of three cameras versus one camera, and then three capture card for three, or whatever your capture input is versus one, you know, SDI or HDMI, there's some cost factors involved. And 4K in certain applications could be more cost-efficient way of accomplishing that purpose. I can't wait for an opportunity to get into a public forum or a debate. I want to do some political debates this fall as we get closer and closer to the election. And I'd love to have a 4K camera so that I can take a picture of all 4 or 5 people that are debating and then slice it and dice it and just see how that's going to work in real life.
You know, have you heard of Mevo? Have you tried the Mevo camera?
I've seen the Mevo.
It's magic.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to do intelligent shot selection based on, I don't know, some rationale. I don't know if it's directional sound sensing or whatnot to actually pick what it's showing you. I've only had one opportunity to play with it, and the Wi-Fi there was dreadful, so we couldn't get it working. But it's a 4K camera that gives you lower res output.
Right. I think I saw it at NAB 2 years ago, and they were having some trouble with it on the floor. The technology is great, but technology is only great when it does what it says it'll do, and that's not always the case. Well, Michael, I've got to wrap up because I've got to get back to work here and make some money and pay for this show. But I do appreciate you taking the time to come in and talk with us today and set up all the different cams so that we could see us and get all the different backstories. It makes the understanding of what's going on so much richer to have that knowledge, and to talk to folks that have been involved with it since the very beginning is really, really cool. And to congratulate your wife, of course, on her Emmy. That's just absolutely outstanding. And she lets
20 years
you keep it in your office. I mean, that how cool is that?
I don't know why that happens.
It's just a piece of stuff at this point, huh? Yeah. Oh, that's fun.
It's just a trinket.
Yep. Well, guys, thank
you
all
sir.
so much for tuning in. Yes, indeed. We're glad to have you. And we will see you guys. We're going to let it run out for a second so we don't cut you right off, but we will see you next week.